Plumeria stems make a great filler flower. Today I have another tutorial teaching you exactly how to make your own. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Michelle from Tell Muchly Paper Blooms. Today I wanted to run through another quick tutorial with you where we're going to learn how to make Plumeria stems. So this flower has two names depending where you are in the world. In like the US and Canada we call this a Plumeria. When I lived in Dubai I knew it as a frangipani, and it was really common to have frangipani trees. We actually had two in our garden and they were so beautiful. So I'm really happy that I have the paper version in my home now because it's just a nice reminder of that for me. So whatever you call them, they're a beautiful flower. They make a great filler flower for in a lot of bouquets, but particularly anything tropical or bright and colourful. They're going to work really well with things like hibiscus. If you missed my tutorial how to make hibiscus, I'll link that up above for you right now so you can go back and watch that. You could pair the hibiscus and these with a peony. Again, I have a tutorial for peonies, which is up above right now. You can pair them together with a peony, some hibiscus, these and some foliage, and you've got yourself a bouquet. You can make a single stem, which is just a small one with 5 flowers, or you can do much bigger ones. You can make several stems and just group them all together. All you'll need for this tutorial is some white crepe paper, some yellow colouring, and I'd recommend some pan pastel, or if you can't get hold of that, then just use a golden coloured eyeshadow. Maybe also a touch of pink as well. You'll want some floral tape in a nice bright green colour. These have got nice bright stems to them. And you'll want some floral wire. For these I used a 20 gauge, but anything like a 20, 22, something like that. You could even use an 18 if that's what you have, but you could actually use most gauges of wire for these. They'll just be more flexible if you have a lighter weight, or a bit more sturdy if you have something thicker. Obviously you'll need some scissors and some tacky glue and a pair of pliers just to trim your wires. Also don't forget I have a free downloadable template. Just click on the link in the description box and go ahead and download yours now. And that's about all you'll need for this tutorial, so let's get into it.
So the first thing you want to do is to stretch your crepe paper. So we're not going to stretch this all the way out, just to about 1.5 times the original width. And then you can take your template and measure that against the crepe paper. And then you want to cut out your petals from the crepe paper, making sure that the grain lines run top to bottom and line up with the 3 lines on the template. So you can cut them out one at a time if you prefer, or you can fold over the paper like I do, which helps to speed things up a little bit. Next you want to take your yellow colouring. So I'm using this yellow pan pastel, which I will pop a link in the description box below for you. And I'm just applying that with a makeup sponge, but you could use a brush or even your finger as well. And you just want to dab that at the bottom of the petal and build that up gradually. So you're aiming for dark yellow at the base of the petal that comes up to just under halfway up. Also, just as a side note, you can probably see this gets quite messy, so make sure you put down some scrap paper before you start working. Once you have a solid colour at the bottom of the petal, you can then blend that in with the same sponge, just don't put any more colour onto the sponge. So you could just leave your petals with the yellow colouring, depending on what colour of flower you want to make. It's also quite common to see Plumeria with a pink tinge right on the edge of the petal. So you can do that with pan pastels again. So here I'm taking just a very tiny amount of pink onto the edge of my petal, and I'm really gently dabbing that. I'm hardly touching the paper at all because I don't want that to be a solid colour, just more of a very slight tint to the edge. When you're doing this, make sure you use a different sponge or a clean brush or finger just so that you don't get the colours merging. So to shape these petals, it's very straightforward. You just want to do a gentle cup on the petal. So just use your thumbs to pull out gently at the edges of the petal, also push into the middle at the same time. And then you'll see there's a tab at the bottom of the petal with the straight edges, and you almost want to fold that over so that you've got something that will stick to the wire. Next, use your pliers to cut the first piece of wire, which you want to be about 4 inches long. And then you want to cut a small piece of the white crepe paper, stretch that all the way out so you've got a small square. Then you just need to cover that in tacky glue and then wrap the edge of the wire. And you're just trying to create a smooth edge at the very top. So if you push that down with your finger, it actually flattens it as well. And then just using the same sponge as before, you can just cover that in the yellow colour just to make it blend in. The next step is to add a small blob of glue to the bottom of each petal. So you only want the glue to be on the tab that we folded over before. To attach the petals, you want to line up the top of the wire so it sticks very slightly above the top of the tab, but only by 1 millimetre or 2. You don't want it to protrude too much, just enough that when you fold the tab, you'll just see a tiny little bit of the top of the wire. As you're adding more petals, you want to make sure that there's an overlap. So what you'll end up with is that each petal tucks under the next one. If you're finding that your petals are sliding around quite a lot because of the glue, then just leave it to dry for maybe 15 minutes between petals. Just keep working your way around, adding petals until you have all 5. As I say, try to make sure that they overlap as you're attaching them, although you can tweak and adjust them afterwards too. So to start with, we're attaching them so that they stick upright, and that's fine because we'll fold them down once the glue is completely dry. So for now, just make sure that they're overlapping and that they're spaced at roughly equal centres. When you're happy with your petals, just make sure to pinch the bottom of the flower to make sure everything is properly stuck. I usually find at this stage it's best to leave the flower for maybe 10 or 15 minutes so that the glue dries before I go on to the next stage. But you can use that time to make the other stems spring the same bloom. For this bloom we'll have 5 stems, so you can go ahead and do the other 4 now. Once you have all 5 stems ready, then you can move on to wrap them with floral tape. So I recommend you use a bright green because this is a tropical flower. So to get started, stretch out the very end piece of tape and then just add a small blob of tacky glue to the end. You then want to wrap that around your stem and make sure that you're pulling that really tightly as you wrap it. So what I do is twist with one hand and pull tightly with the other as I'm moving it. You also want to take that right up to the underside of the petals so that it finishes off that edge neatly. Then when you get to the bottom of the stem, just add another little bit of glue and then twist that round really tightly. And instead of cutting that off at the bottom of the wire, just leave some excess tape, which is just twisted, because that's going to help your transitions when you wrap all the stems together to stop you getting as many lumps and bumps. So it's actually quite useful to have these different individual stems at different lengths so that they're not all finishing in the same place. So you'll notice that when I cut my wire and also when I'm doing this tape technique at the bottom, they're never the same length, they're all rough estimates, nothing is ever measured, and that's just to help with the transitions. So you can go ahead and wrap all 5 of your stems now. You can also add a slight bend in the wire to make it look more realistic. Next you want to take your main stem wire and cut that down to whatever length you want the flowers to be. And then you're just going to go ahead and wrap that in floral tape, just exactly the same as before, so making sure that you stretch it out as you're working so that it activates the glue. And then I also like to add some little blobs of glue as I'm working my way down the stem as well. Make sure you wrap the whole wire, including the ends, so that you don't get the sharp edges. And when you get to the bottom, we're going to leave an overlap, which is just tape again, just to help with those transitions as we did before. So then we're just going to turn that wire around so that the tape overlap is actually at the top, and I've got a good couple of inches of overlap there. And then I'm going to line that up with my first stem so that the top of the tape overlap is roughly at the bottom of the petals. And then I'm just going to add some glue and then wrap that around both of the pieces of wire. Again, I'm pulling this really tightly. You need to make sure that this is nice and secure so that nothing moves once it's all finished. So pull that really tightly with one hand and twist with the other. You can take your time with this and make sure you get it right. Once all of the flower stem is covered, then you can just add some more glue and finish off the tape there. Don't worry too much about the junctions at this point. Then you want to take the rest of your flowers and we're just going to group those together at about the same height and just adjust those slightly to make sure you've got them in the right positions that you want them in. Once you're happy with them, you can add some tacky glue and then again wrap the wires with the floral tape. Again, it's really important that you do this really tightly. So just take your time, and if you need to break that into smaller pieces to make it easier to work with, you can do. You want to make sure that you don't take the tape up too high because you want to be able to adjust these branches from the top. So Plumeria stems tend to branch out in different directions. They're not all clustered together too much. So you want to have that flexibility to adjust them once you're finished. So I'm leaving a good few inches at the top before I start the tape. Once they're all attached, just keep working your way down with the floral tape. Make sure you add a little bit of glue to the ends of any bits of tape and just keep working your way up and down the stem and focusing on any areas where there's a lump or a bump. So if you add more tape to those areas, it'll start to even out any bumps. So you'll see here the top of the wire is obviously a lot thicker than the bottom, so I'm just going to keep working my way around until that evens out. Then you can go back in and adjust your wires to get them in a position you're happy with. Now obviously this is going to be flexible and you can always come back and do that later, so once it's in a bouquet you can adjust it to be how you want it to be. So now that everything's all attached, you can also go back in and just tweak your flowers. If they've moved as you've been working, you can just readjust those now. I do find with this particular flower, because you're trying to get the overlap on the petals, it's quite hard sometimes to get the final petal to do that. So I'd sometimes just add a tiny bit of glue onto the underside of the petal to make that then stick to its neighbouring petal. So you want to make sure that all 5 petals overlap on one side, so you can't actually tell where the start or the finish is.
So hopefully you've got lots of lovely Plumeria stems now. I'd love to see how they've turned out. So if you do make them, please do share the photos with me on Instagram. You can tag me at tarmuchley_paperblooms and use the hashtag tarmuchleypaperblooms. I'd love to share those with the paper flower community there too. If you found this tutorial helpful, please do hit the like button and make sure that you subscribe so that you get notified when the next tutorial goes live. It really does help me out if you do that. Tarmuchley for being here to celebrate life's special moments with me.